Hey y'all, so today we're going to look at the charges of ions, and in order to do that, we're going to be looking at this. Now, hopefully you all recognize this as the periodic table, but the big takeaway for today's lesson is going to be the identification that if you are in the first column, you're generally going to have a +1 charge when you're an ion. If you are in the second column, you're going to have a +2 charge when you're an ion, +3, -3, -2, and -1 respectively. And that's just reminding you what we probably ended up talking about in our Gen Chem class last year. So let's go ahead and get started here. Today we're going to be looking at ionic charges and the periodic table. So just a reminder, right, when we are looking at ions are going to be charged particles that become charged by gaining or losing electrons. And specifically based on their placement on the periodic table, they will gain and lose electrons, gain and lose a specific amount of electrons. So for example, when we're looking at oxygen, oxygen is a part of the sixth column, or rather 16th, depending on which set of rules you use for the periodic table. It's a part of the chalcogen family. And any element that is a part of that row, the sixth row, will have a charge of -2, which means that oxygen, when it becomes an ion, gains 2 electrons and has a charge of -2. This, once again, is a representation. This lovely image here is a representation of the specific charges of elements that you should know and have on the back of your mind. If you're in the first column, +1, second column, +2. Moving all the way over to the aluminum and gallium, you see it's +3, -3, -2, and -1 for those last 3 columns there. Now, as far as the middle group goes, remember that middle group is the transition metals. And the transition metals have a specific set of rules that we're going to look at as well. So remember that most of the transition metals do not form specific charges. They do not have specific numbers of electrons that they lose. And they can have multiple ionic forms. So for example, iron can either be +2 because it lost 2 electrons, or it can be +3 because it lost 3. Two notable exceptions to this are going to be silver and zinc. Silver, when it forms an ion, always loses 1 electron and will always be the ion with a +1 charge. So silver will always have a +1 charge. And zinc always has a +2 charge. Now, even though that and tin, lead and tin are not a part of the transition metals, they behave very similarly to those transition metals and can form ions with different charges. So for example, lead can either lose 2 electrons and form the 2+ ion, or it can lose 4 electrons and become the 4+ ion. So lead 2 or lead 4 are the 2 possibilities for that. Now, last but not least, just some vocabulary that is going to be important in terms of gaining or losing electrons. When elements gain electrons, they become negatively charged, and we call those anions. The neutral atom generally will gain electrons to become an anion. And elements that are cations will generally lose electrons. When things lose electrons, they become positively charged. All right, I hope this helps. And as always, have a great day.